So, I've just come back from doing a one-to-one tutorial with a client, and during the process I came up with this image. Now, this is okay, it's not going to win any awards or anything, but what I like about it is it started off life like this, and on the screen, on the LCD of the camera, this part at the bottom here, this looked extremely dark and you couldn't really tell whether it was going to work or not. And the whole point I was making to the guy I was teaching was if you shoot raw, the amount of detail that you can pull out and the amount of shadows that you can pull out. So we kind of did this based on the histogram. I was explaining how, you know, you've got to really pay attention to your histogram in this case. And because the ground is so dark, the foreground is so dark, and the sky is so bright at points. What I said was I would give him, you know, I showed him through a quick bit of editing on the iPad, and I said I would, you know, sort of let him know what I did and send him an email and so on. And I just thought actually it might be a good idea to do a video, because there might be a few other people who can sort of learn a bit from this whole process of rescuing the shadows and so on, and kind of how to shoot. So if we have a look at the histogram on this, if we start from this is the raw file, and it's got to be stressed that you've got to rescue something like this, and to be able to shoot straight into the sun like this, you need to be shooting raw. If this was a JPEG, there would be not enough detail to get back, because if we take a look at the histogram here, we can see that we really struggled to capture all the information, and to a certain extent we haven't. If we look at the top end at these highlights here, you can see that it's just peaking a little bit. Now this would be this central area here that is essentially the sun, and you just got to make a decision that you're going to lose that, and let's face it, you're not going to have much detail in the sun anyway. So I kind of said to him, don't worry too much that we're losing these details here. Let's concentrate on trying to get as much as we can down the other end, down the left-hand end in the shadows. But again, you can see we've dropped off there. So it was kind of impossible for the camera to get all of the light that was here, the contrast that was within this scene. This is despite using a very strong, a 0.9 graduated neutral density filter. So we were already filtering the sky here to try and bring some of this down. Now I could have used a reverse grad, but I didn't have it with me. So this is what we got, and I just thought it'd be nice to do a video on rescuing these shadows, the area that's in shadow, and pulling down the highlights and so on, and show exactly what you can do with, if you like, what almost is a lost cause. So having said that, let's crack on and see what we can do. So first thing we do is we're going to whack the contrast up quite a lot. Now the next thing I do is, again, as anybody who's ever seen any of my other videos, is we'll close this module and we will go to the effects module, and I always bring up the dehaze. I'm going to leave it about there for now. So that's kind of done on knowing my camera, knowing my lens, knowing the situation. That sometimes will need playing with, sometimes won't. But the next thing I want to do now is do the shadows and the highlights. Excuse me. So the first thing is to bring down these highlights, which by bringing down the highlights, you can see we're recovering this area in the middle here. So let's bring that down. Okay, so you can see now we've really rescued this, the detail of where the sun is shining. The next thing is to recover what's in this foreground area. So we're going to bring the shadows up, and we need to bring them up a lot. Now the first thing to notice as we bring these up is the way this light is so beautiful on this foreground now. So we haven't got a clue about that before. If I take this down to where it was, this is just so dull and boring, and it, you know, okay, you could have it as a silhouette-y shot if you wanted to, and there is an option to do that. But the whole point of this is to show what we can bring out of the shadows. So I'm going to bring the shadows and I'm going to bring them right up, and I'm going to go to 100, and that has brought out some really nice light in this foreground. Now, having said that, one thing it's also brought out is just some artifacts here that is just a little bit of lens flare, but we'll deal with that shortly, those few little artifacts. So after we've brought those out, it's all, you know, if we just look at what we had, we've already gone from this to this. But next, what we need to do is we need to make it pop a little bit. So the first thing we use to make it pop is the vibrance. So we bring the vibrance up just to make it pop. And what I'm looking at here is not really the blue of the sky, because I don't actually like this blue, and we're going to work with that shortly, and we're going to actually bring the saturation down. But what I'm looking at here is just this orange, okay, where the sun is. So if we go back to that, we're just bringing out the orange in the sun. That's all that's really doing. But I always use the vibrant slider. I always bring it up, very rarely bring it down unless there's a particular reason to. In this case, I'm just going to bring it up to there, and that gives me just a little more colour in the sun. Okay, the next thing is, for me, bearing in mind this was, bearing in mind this was shot during golden hour, for me this is a little bit on the blue side. For some reason the camera has I had it on auto white balance, and it's just gone a little on the blue side. So we are going to bring this slider, and as you can see, that's getting a little more golden. Now there's the golden light in the foreground here. Sorry, I'm pointing at it with my finger. We've got the gold. This got much more golden in the foreground. It's got much more realistic in the sky, and this is essentially how it looked at the time. I think we could probably go a little more, but if you think about it, this is how, if you think about an early morning shot, it doesn't look, sorry, when the sun's risen, it doesn't look like that kind of blue. It looks more of a golden. That's why it's called golden hour. So I'm happy with that as the temperature. If we go back to what we originally had, we can see this is already looking much better, and we have rescued quite a lot. The next thing is we want to do something with this foreground over and above what's happened so far. So we've done it. It's done a pretty good job so far, but I tend to, more often than not nowadays, I tend to treat the sky and the ground different using a couple of graduated filters. So the first thing is to take a graduated filter and pop in here, and we're just going to bring the exposure up a little bit more, and we can just, I'm not going to worry too much about this. You could spend a lot of time placing this, but I'm going to bring that down just a little bit there, because we've got these artifacts that were here, and that might help just mask them. So rather than coming right up here, and that avoids us brightening that sun up too much as well. So I quite like that. So that's brought the, we don't want to go too far with that light. We want it to be realistic, but that's just brought the light up there on the land. And the next thing I'm going to do is I want to put some clarity in this. This will kind of bring out some of the detail in this foreground and some of the contrast in the foreground. So if we just grab the clarity slider, and we're going to go quite bonkers with it, and you can see what the clarity slider does. Again, if I bring it back, we go to about 65. If I bring it back, Yeah, it's kind of got much more dramatic in the foreground, and the light again looks even more dramatic. Okay, so the next thing is, it's still looking a little on the green side. Looking at it as we continue, and the more you look at it, it's still looking a little on the green side for me. So again, we're just gonna make that slightly more. I think we'll leave it at that. We're gonna make that slightly more golden by just bringing the temperature of just that foreground up a little bit. And I think I'm happy to crack on and accept that for what it is. So if we come out of there, let's just have a look at where we were and look at where we are now. Not bad. Right, now as I said, I like to treat the sky and the foreground differently. So we're going to do that now, and we're going to pull down, and we still got our old settings, so we will just undo all of those. It's a bit annoying, it doesn't do that on the iPad. It retains those settings that you just used on your last one, but hey ho. So on the sky, what I want to do is pull the exposure down a little bit. I like a nice dark sky. We don't want to go too mad, but I do like a nice dark sky. So we're just going to come down a little bit on that. Then to make these clouds pop, these cirrus clouds, to make these really sort of separate from the blue of the sky, we're going to just do some clarity and bring that up. Now, going high with the clarity doesn't always work. I like using it in black and white. It can make it look a bit grainy. It's not always a thing to do in a landscape image, but certain things lend them to it. And two things are this sort of grass, anything with grass or rough grass, if you like, something that has that kind of, textured effect to it. Works well with that. And the other thing is cirrus clouds. If it was, more cumulus clouds, I wouldn't use it because it can look very over the top. But I quite like it with cirrus clouds. Having said that, it's of course a matter of taste. And we've got a bit of a vignette sort of round the top here from using the graduated filter. So the other thing we can just do here is in the sky, bring up the shadows a little bit. It's not the be all and end all. It doesn't matter if we do, doesn't matter if we don't, but it's, I've just done it. So now let's have a look how that's looking. Let's compare it with the original. Let's go to here. We're getting there. It's not bad. Now, I think on the ground, we'll just pop back to that, and I'm just going to try and pop the contrast a little bit to give us what makes the foreground in this shot for me is the contrast. It's the difference between those dark areas and those light areas. It's the way the light falls across the land, because this is first thing in the morning, it's sunrise. So if we up the contrast like that, I think that's even better. So I'm going to go with that. Brilliant, good. Now, if we go back into here, you'll notice it's still a little on the dark side, I think, overall. Because of what we've done, it's a little on the dark side. So we're just going to pull up the overall exposure. Just bring that up. And, okay, we're getting there. So what's next? Well, we're going to do some stuff with the colours and just some finishing touches. But first, before we do that, I just want to draw attention to not only are there a few artifacts down here from the light straight into the lens, but look on this windmill. Okay, we've really got some artifacts there. So What can we do about that? Well, easiest thing to do, we could go into Photoshop and do some some fixing of that with the spot healing or the cloning tool or whatever. But I think the easiest way to deal with it in this case is just grab the brush tool. It's kept all the settings again. It's infuriating. Doesn't do that on the iPad. Did I mention that? And what we want to do is bring the exposure down a tad, and we just want to brush that in that area. And as you can see, that kind of makes that just gradually disappear. I've got the brush size fairly small, but I've got it quite heavily feathered. So we have to be a bit careful we don't go over the edge here, but we're just colouring in these areas, okay? And then we can do the same down here. We can gradually just colour in. I'm not sure whether they're artifacts or not, but they are distracting, so that's the main thing. So we can just put a bit of shadow in here, essentially, and we could play away with that for ages and ages and ages, but you can see that's essentially what we can do to get rid of those artifacts. And you can see now the windmill is there in shadow. Fine with that, don't want any detail on the windmill in that respect anyway, so I've got no problem there. Okay, so now we've kind of got it balanced, we've got rid of those few artifacts, or we've had an attempt, and we could do more if we wanted to play around for a while. The final thing, the penultimate thing, before we just do a bit of sharpening and so on, is to have a play with the colour. Now, first and foremost, we can have a play with the blue. And so the first thing is, the blue's not bad. I like a nice dark blue. That's probably okay. But what I like to do is just pull back the saturation a little bit, and I like to pull the luminance down. There's a little bit of lag, but I just like to pull the luminance down a bit. After that, we need to, these areas sort of here are a little bit cyan, so we're going to just have a play. We'll go more to the blue on those areas. Again, we'll bring the saturation down a little bit and the luminance down a little bit without going too over the top. Now, the yellow, we had this little bit of banding here, so I'm hoping that we can do something with the yellow. Now first we're going to make it go a little more towards orange, and then we're going to bring the saturation back a little bit, and you can just see that banding starting to disappear. And finally the orange, we can just saturate the sky a little more, just make sure we don't get any banding, and we could just bring the luminance down to make this pop a little bit more here, but without going over the top. Just one thing, if we do too much, it starts to look really, really contrived and almost like someone's painted it in. It's too much. So we just have to be careful doing that. Okay, so there is just a quick bit of playing with the colours. That's not what I wanted that one, so that's how we started off, that's how we've got it now. Okay, last thing that I always do is we go in and we'll do a little bit of sharpening. It's taken with the 7-14 lens, so I know that always needs about 50 on the sharpening, and then we just mask in, click Alt, and this is just to make sure we're only sharpening the edges of the important stuff, so we're not sharpening the sky and so on. So, basically anything that's white is being sharpened, and bang. So there's a lot of masking on that. We go all the way to 90, and hey presto. One final little thing is we could shove a little vignette on there. There is a vignette sort of naturally in the sky, but could just pull down a little bit, just to sort of go into this sort of centering on the sun, as if we're really pulling the viewer in there. So there you go. thanks very much for watching. I hope it was helpful. I hope you learned something. If you've got any questions, please ask. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the subscribe button. Plenty more to come. And I'll see you next time. Thanks very much.